people who knew the right way to live. In other words, for Christians. The year, according to the Christian calendar, was 1607, and these Christians were here to stay. They had already named this place Virginia, and they meant to make it theirs. Still mad at themselves for having said no to Christopher Columbus when they might have said yes and beaten the Spanish to the New World, they were going to make up for lost time. They had their directions from London. They were to find gold and a shortcut to the other ocean. They were to be friendly to the natives and turn them into Christians. Finally, they were to provide goods that would make money for England. They were told to build their houses in straight lines, and when they wrote home, they were to write cheerful letters. By the time that the English reached Chesapeake Bay, April 26, 1607, however, they had little cheerful to say. After 4 months of being cooped up on shipboard, the 104 passengers were sick to death of each other. John Smith, a 27-year-old adventurer, could not abide Master Edward Wingfield, who would be president of the ruling council, with his high and mighty airs. In turn, Master Wingfield heartily disliked John Smith, an upstart who acted as if he knew it all. Both men were suspicious of Captain Gabriel Archer, a born troublemaker, and both were impatient with Captain John Ratcliffe, who wanted to go home when the seas became too rough. Poor Robert Hunt, the preacher, tried to keep peace among the passengers, but it was hard, especially since he was seasick so often. John Smith reported that he made wild vomits into the black night. One of the few men who seemed to command the respect of all was one-armed Captain Christopher Newport, who was in charge of the expedition while at sea. Everyone thought it was lucky that his name was Christopher, like Christopher Columbus. But once they had landed and started exploring, the spirits of the men rose. What a paradise Virginia was! Raccoons as big as foxes, they reported, possums like month-old pigs, vines the size of a man's thigh, strawberries 4 times bigger than English strawberries, and oysters thick as stones. Best of all, there were rocks that sparkled. Gold, John Martin said, and since his father was a goldsmith, he should know. And up the river there was a 2-mile-long peninsula, a perfect place to settle. They tied their ships up to the trees and called the place Jamestown in honor of their king at home. There were also natives, whom the English called savages. They encountered them when they first went ashore. After their long trip, the men were so glad to stretch their legs they stayed until dark, not noticing the 5 Indians creeping on hands and knees through the tall grass, their bows in their mouths. Then all at once the air was filled with arrows. Captain Archer was shot in both hands. A sailor was wounded. Then the English fired their guns and the natives darted back to the woods. John Smith was the one who seemed to know most about handling the natives. At least he claimed he did. Before joining this expedition, he had fought the Turks in Europe. He'd been captured, made a slave, and had so many narrow escapes that he figured he understood savages pretty well. Gentleness was not the way to deal with them, he said. The English should show strength. They should rely on fear, not love, to keep peace. This was only common sense. But John was afraid there wasn't much common sense among these settlers. The English built a fort on their peninsula, and as they settled down, they found there were natives all around them. Many seemed friendly, glad to exchange corn for tiny bells and pretty glass beads. Pocahontas would love those beads. When the English clapped their hands over their hearts in the sign of friendship, the natives would lower their bows, give 2 shouts of welcome, and offer food and pipes of tobacco. Once a chieftain wearing a crown of bear's hair played a flute. They even told the English that, yes, the ocean they were looking for was just ahead, up the river and beyond the falls.